Hey, so what's up? Today I'm here to talk about this bike. Alright, so this is my 2020 Vertigo R2. It's a 300cc. So you might accuse me of trying to get on the popular bandwagon, and you know what? I kind of am. So, you know, between Jaime Busto keeping Vertigo up on the podium in the World Series, and then the great work Danny Butler's done over on Trial 2, him talking about his bike, and then Vertigo just being around a little longer, you know, you're starting to see him more at some of the competitions. At least some people are, depending on where you live. And people are becoming more interested in the bike. So I thought I'd do a little video, talk about the bike, the pros and cons I've had of owning it. I was hoping to push this video back a couple months, closer to a full year owning it. Right now I'm going on about 10, 11 months of ownership. But because right now people are asking questions about the bike, I thought it'd be a perfect time to try to answer some of those questions. So we're gonna look over the bike a little bit. We're gonna talk about some of the features, some of the things I really love about my bike, and a few things that I kind of don't like so much. But I do believe some of those have been addressed in the new Nitro series. So yeah, let's get started. So one of the first things, we do have Brake Tech brakes. This is the solid monoblock brake. It is not the CNC machined one, but it is the monoblock. It is not the two-piece cast. It's a single-piece cast. So a little step up from, like, say, your factory Scorpas or Shercos, but not quite as nice as the TRS Gold Series. Still nice brakes, work really well. I think they're great. Some people say they're a little bit touchy. Some people say they could be a little touchier. I don't think they're quite as grabby as a normal TRS, but they definitely work plenty well for me. Another thing, we have adjusters. The R-Series bike comes with all the nice fancy quick adjusters on the levers. That's great. Love the red anodized bling too. Okay, another thing I like, you can see your feel, which mine currently is empty. I ride it a lot, what can I say? Alright, the foot pegs. So I'm a big fan of the S3 Hard Rock pegs. These are the standard pegs on the R-Series Vertigos, and it looks like now on the Nitro as well. Again, you got the Vertigo emblem in there. They are nice, wide, provide a lot of grip, and I really like them. I felt no need to replace them with the Hard Rocks. But yeah, your mileage might vary, but to me, that's something that I'm factoring into the cost of the bike. You know, that's $130 or so, $170, I don't know. Anyway, over $100 for a pair of Hard Rock pegs. And these are on there, so yep, you're paying more for the bike, but you are getting some of the niceties for it. Okay, another cool feature, the Vertigo rear brake. It is tucked inside the frame pretty good. It's gonna be pretty hard to break that. However, our very own Michigan dealer, not mentioning any names, has creatively found a way to break his, but generally it's not something you're gonna ever have to worry about on a Vertigo. Okay, also the kickstart. Again, little Vertigo emblem into it. But anyway, I love it. Very smooth, very beefy, and best of all, check out those serrations. It's pretty hard to slip off of this. Again, not naming any other brands by name. Anyway, you guys could take a note from this, as well as a few other brands. For any of us that ever slipped off and smacked that in the back of our knees or our shins, you definitely understand the pain. No, I promise I'm not picking on Scorpa. I have a 2019 factory edition 300. It's a very nice bike, very enjoyable ride. But again, Vertigo for the win on the kickstart, in my opinion. Your mileage might vary. Just look at this bash plate. Yep, definitely worn the paint off a little bit. But check this thing out. There is not much in the way of any bends or damage to it. Real damage other than paint. And guys, I gotta be honest. Like I said, I'm kind of a mid-level trials rider. I'm still learning some of the advanced techniques, and this bash plate has taken some hits. I mean, there's been some things where I've just like cringed and almost cried because it was such a hard hit. I mean, like, you know, you kind of weep for the bike and you're like, surely I must have just broke something. But this plate is still looking good in more or less the original factory condition. Let's see, here's a pretty good little gouge right there. Somewhere along the edge here from some rocks. But man, overall, this plate has taken a world of abuse from me, and it's still looking good and straight. I have smashed and destroyed a beta plate. My Scorpa plates are both got some pretty good bends in them, and this thing is going strong. So no complaints there. And like I said, I've had some downright hard landings on this bash plate. Another thing is, for those of you wondering about oil, it is much the same as doing oil on a beta. You got your drain plug right underneath and access to it. We also have a meowing cat. Thank you, cat. Can't you see I'm filming a video? Your fill plug's right there. And we have a sight glass right there. Okay, for the shifter. That is nice and tucked in behind the side of the engine case. There's a little bit there you could catch on something, but that's fairly tucked away. Again, not naming any other brands, but if you look down, depending on the bike you ride, you might notice a substantial gap in there, and something that might make it a lot easier to get snagged on something and bent or broken. So again, another small thing I like about the Vertigo design, just something they were thinking of, trying to keep things tucked in, but it's still a nice, good-sized nub to shift. But that does bring me to another thing. You need that nice, good-sized lug to shift, because Vertigo is not the smoothest shifting of trials bikes I've ridden, at least not my own personal example. Gets the job done. You know, none of the trials bikes' transmissions are exactly what I would call smooth, but this one can be a little notchy and stubborn sometimes. Another issue addressed on the Nitro, but is an issue with some of the older Vertigos, such as mine, or the R3s, or going back earlier. This rear mudguard can get a little saggy. Even brand new, they're a more or less kind of just slightly upward facing, fairly flat shape. Does give the Vertigo a distinct shape, but they do get a little flexy. Plus side, they are a little flexy. So, not too worried about breaking that in a crash normally. I've not had any issues with it. And as they pointed out on Trials Tube, they are cheap to replace. So that is a cool bonus as well. Consideration, right here is your water pump. Easy to get to, easy to replace if needed. It is sourced from a car. Offhand, I can't recall the model, but it is an automotive part. It's not a unique to Vertigo part. You know, I've never had any problems, but I don't live in a particularly rocky area. I suppose you hit that just right on the right rock, you could have some issues. I can't say I've ever heard of anybody having issues with it, but I suppose that is something that we could point out as, I don't know, possibly a con in the, you know, worst case, perfect or worst scenario you could think of. But the nice thing is, with the electric water pump, you know, you're getting good coolant flow, whether or not you're at idle or you're running the engine wide open. With the mechanical pump, obviously, you know, pump speed varies with RPM. So, you know, that's kind of a nice deal there. Pros and cons to it. The stock R series bikes have come with the carbon fiber protector on both sides here. You see it right in there. And mine has gotten a little bit of use. And there's the other side. Love the emblem molded into it. Definitely has saved some damage. Got the intercooler on there. Does it do much good? Yeah, supposedly 10%. Either way, it looks dang good and makes me happy. Alright, you might notice, maybe, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, a little bit of an oil leak here. So, one issue I've had with my Vertigo, and part of it I blame on where I live. So let me just show you around. Everywhere you look are dried oak leaves. Alright, so I live out in the country. Now, originally I thought this was a seal problem, and Vertigo's US importer sent me a new seal right away as soon as I told them there was a problem. They have done great about taking care of me. Turns out, an issue I'm having, Vertigo has the case protector right here in case your chain was to break. It's going to help protect your case, help keeping the chain from going up there, slapping and cracking the case. That's awesome. But because we have the fuel tank close in there, because we have the case protector, one of the problems that happens is I get oak leaves that'll get sucked in through the chain, and actually the little tiny sliver of oak leaf will slip in between the oil seal and the counter shaft, and it'll actually create a little oil leak for me. End of the world? Certainly not. Overall, I wouldn't trade my Vertigo for anything right now, at least not another trials bike. But it is something that I have had to deal with, again, partly due to the nature of where I live, partly due to the design. Is it a design flaw? No, I don't really think so, but it is an issue that can come up with this design. Okay, one thing you may or may not know is with your rear guards right here, these have these little spacers in there. So if you prefer a slightly narrow feel bike, you can take those out and it will shave off, well, I'm guessing probably ½ inch to 1 inch of width overall. Or if you have one without these spacers, you can easily buy the spacers or make them. At least I can, I'm a CNC machinist. And you could widen it back up if you wanted. But kind of cool. I hear the pro riders like them a little wider so they have something to grip on some of the more extreme maneuvers they do. But hey, if you're not doing that and you like a thin feel, you can thin the bike out a little bit, depending on your model. Okay, another issue I had. Can you see the oil up there around the exhaust flange? Yep, so I had a light little impact on the bottom of the pipe like that. Just slipped off a small log, it kind of rolled off the wheel onto the pipe. Wasn't a hard hit, relatively speaking, but ever since then, it's had a bit of a leak. I've replaced the exhaust seal a few times, and it is still leaking a little bit. The flange material they use, that exhaust flange on there, it's stainless steel, but it is pretty flexy stainless steel. I feel like maybe it flexes too much, and that could be part of the sealing issues. You just can't get as much tension on the pipe as it needs up against the seal. You know, not the end of the world, but I'm trying to do an honest review here, be fair, and point out all the little things that I can think of, and that is one of the things that is annoying, but not a deal breaker, and certainly in the grand scheme of how much I love this bike, not something that would ever keep me from buying another one. Positive and a negative, and that is now completely different on the Nitro. We have the muffler. All right, so on this bike, that is actually part of the subframe. That's what your rear mudguard's bolting to, essentially. And, you know, I like that it's tucked away. You can see it kind of runs just with the bike. You don't have anything hanging off the sides. That's great and all. It does limit suspension travel, and you can see my tire has left a couple marks on there. Though, I mean, for the average person, I don't think that extra gain in suspension travel is a make or break, but it does limit suspension travel a little bit. And the other big negative is this is not a serviceable unit. When it eventually does get loaded up and the packing burns out, you're probably buying a new one. And while I haven't priced it, that's a pretty good chunk of silencer. I can't imagine it is cheap. Maybe a slight downside, depending on who you are. If you're like me and you came from a Scorpa, you'll notice I cannot get at that plug just anytime I want. It is in there a little ways. You do actually have to remove the air box. That is done simply by removing this bolt here, lifting the cover off, pulling the air filter straight out, and then there's one more small screw just like this in the front. Pull that out, the air box slips out. Doesn't take very long, not a big deal, but not quite as convenient as something, say, like the Scorpa design. So here the bike is with the other cover off. You can see there's the lattice work on the exhaust that the cover attaches to. Just slips up underneath the rear mudguard and then bolts in right here and then on the other side. So here we have our Athena Get ECU, a little bit of the wiring. This wire here, it wraps back around to a Wi-Fi box right in here. And that allows me to reset the TPS as well as make any ignition or fuel adjustments that I would care to make, should I care to make some. There's also a few other things you can see in there, but those are some of the main things you're capable of doing with that. Got your fuel filler right there. Something interesting in here, look at the way the shock mounts. So yeah, that's right. The bike is running that way, but the shock mounts that way. I've not seen one done like that before, but the cool thing it does do is puts the rebound adjuster facing this way, so I can get in right through here with a screwdriver and adjust my rebound without having to remove anything or do anything special. So some people have had problems with the filler cap on here. The newer models, you can see there's that reinforcing brace on there that helps keep it strong, but if you over tighten these, you will have a problem taking it off. And because the filler neck is so small, some people have had problems with twisting the filler neck off on the older models. Another thing I've noticed, just of note, while the engine characteristic is much smoother than any bike I've ridden, and that would be a 2019 Scorpa 300 factory, a 2016 Scorpa 300 standard, a 2021 TRS Gold, 2014 Beta, 2017 Gas GP, TXT, or TXT GP, however it would be. I have not found another two-stroke trials bike that rivals the smoothness of this engine as far as the power delivery and characteristics just off idle. That being said, the engine itself does vibrate more than some of the other bikes I've ridden. So, while it's always a good thing to go over the nuts and bolts of your bike and check them, I do find on my Vertigo that I need to go over things a little more often and make sure everything is tight on it. Okay, I don't really know what else to say about the bike. It's done really good for me. A couple weird oddities. If it is kind of cool out but humid, sometimes the bike will run a little weird because it's not able to sense the humidity. It doesn't have a mass airflow sensor. So you have a temperature sensor, a pressure sensor. Between the two of those, it's running an algorithm inside and it's figuring out, okay, well, the air density is probably this, so we need to adjust the fuel ratio for this, theoretical air density. But if you have kind of a cool day, but it's humid, okay, the bike's running a little rich, but it may not pick up on that. So that's one of the things to be aware of. Sometimes you will get some weird oddities. 95% of the time though, this bike is running more consistent and more reliable than any of the carb bikes I've ever had. Yes, I do my own jetting. I know how to do jetting. But this, you start it. Now, on the note of starting it, like Danny Butler pointed out, yes, when it's cold, you're gonna have a few kicks into it to get it started. For my bike, normally 4 to 6 kicks when it's cold. It's been up to 10 as kind of a max number, but generally it's 4 to 6. Once the bike is warm, like say I'm riding it down the loop, I stop at a section, I walk the section, hey, maybe I'm even sitting there, 5-10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes, walking the section, talking to people, whatever. I come back to the bike, 90% of the time, it's 1 kick to get it back started and going. Sometimes you might have 2 kicks into it, especially if it gets really hot. Sometimes I've noticed, like, if I'm running a loop pretty hard and I stop and I get back on it, sometimes it's 2 kicks, but generally it's a first kick start once it's warmed up. Another thing, there's a map switch on here, and unlike a lot of the just standard carbureted bikes, because you're not only changing the ignition timing, you're also changing the fuel ratios, it does actually make a real perceived difference, both on the off-idle response as well as kind of the mid-range. That's great. The downside, and I'm not the only person to report this, I have my theories as to why it is, but I don't know if it's every bike. I don't know if it's just a handful of us, but I have had other guys other than myself talk about this. When you set it on the softer map, I do get a little bit of engine knock, a little bit of pre-detonation. That said, it does really soften the bike up. It makes a noticeable difference in the characteristic of the bike, and it can definitely make some tricky sections a lot easier. On the aggressive map, it's still a very easy bike to handle. The power on the bottom is soft, but it revs up really quick. It's great because you can go from gentle to outright rocket ship real quick and easy. I love the characteristics of this bike. I've never ridden a bike with a smoother low end and still having a very nice aggressive top end and an over rev that's just phenomenal. Like, this bike will rev. It's insane how high this bike will rev and how long it produces power. When Vertigo claims that 30 some odd horse on a trials bike, I definitely believe them. So, one thing I'm not going to show you because I have no reason to. I'm just going to say the case splits roughly kind of right here. So instead of the case splitting down the middle of it, like every traditional bike, the case splits this way. So that means theoretically you could do a full crank and piston replacement without ever actually dropping the engine off the bike. The other thing that's really cool is because of the way the case comes apart, you take the clutch cover off on the other side, take your clutch basket out, then a couple screws underneath that, and the whole transmission pulls right out the side. So again, you don't have to remove the engine from the frame. You can get in there, and when it comes time, if you're keeping the bike long enough, when it comes time to replace all your transmission bearings, everything slides out the side relatively quickly and easy. Let you get in there, replace your bearings, have the bike back together, and again, you're not taking the engine off the frame. I think that's pretty cool. We'll see what happens by the time that actually comes around and I have to do it. If I think about it, I'll try to document it when I do. But it's a neat idea, some innovation. How well it works, I don't know. I've heard good things from the guys that have had to do it. We'll see when my time comes what I think. Okay, a bit of the close-up of the airbox. Got your water drain right here. Again, that's your vent line for the crankcase breather. Oil collection box in there. Air sensor in there, that's your temp and I believe pressure sensor. At least temp. Air intake, one of the air intakes, I should say. So you get air that flows up through here, as well as some extra air that flows in through here. Yep, that's it. One thing I do like about this, it comes off easy enough. When I do my air filter, I can take this in, I can wash this all out too, get everything nice and clean. Danny covered this over on Trials Tube, but just to reiterate in my video, your axle here is keyed to the adjuster here on the other side. So, really cool thing. I personally do recommend taking tension off of the tensioner while you do this, but once you loosen your rear axle, you can stick a T-handle in here and turn, and you're moving both adjusters at the same time. Again, I personally recommend taking some tension off because, hey, this is just aluminum here. It will wear after time. I want my bike to last as long as it can because I freaking like this bike and I want to keep it nice as long as I can. Well, the Vertigo is fitted with a fancy pair of tech forks. If you're coming off of, probably, I know for sure, a Scorpa factory, but maybe, I'm assuming, the TRS and the Gas or whoever else fits the nice high-end tech forks. One thing I was a little disappointed about, however, it's worked good enough, it hasn't, it's not something I dwell on, but Vertigo does not have the compression adjuster at the bottom of the forks. You know, it does have the bottom out adjuster, like tech forks have. You got your standard preload and rebound adjuster, but it does not have the compression adjuster. Do I wish it had it? Yes, but I'm telling you, the suspension does feel pretty dang good on here. I weigh about 200 pounds, so it is what it is. It works really good for me at my level of riding. You know, you see the wall I got out there. I'm dropping off of that all the time. I'm not getting any real harsh bottoming or anything. The bike goes over the rocks really good. So it's not like, oh my goodness, you know, I really hate them for not having this on there. But for the money you're spending, I wish it was part of the package. Okay, another plus, or I shouldn't really say plus, but more common sense thing that Vertigo probably should have done earlier but didn't. They've relocated the map switch here on top of the airbox cover. This was I believe, first on the R2 and then continued on from there out. So like the Works 21, which is a standard model, the R3, the Nitro moving forward. The switch is here where it should be. The older bikes used to keep them on the headlight, but if you're like me and you have a number plate for competition, that didn't exactly work so well, so you had to find a place to relocate the map switch to. So, my opinion, good little bit of forward progress there. Something they probably should have done a little earlier, but nonetheless, they got it on this, and it works really good for me. Okay, one guy was saying these bikes look kind of rough after about a year. He sees them going on the market, they're looking pretty old. Well, hey, I don't know. Maybe if you don't maintain your bike, maybe if you're out abusing it all the time, I don't know. I ride my bike all the time. I done many events this year. I'm throwing it around here at the house. I'm still learning a lot, so the bike has taken extra abuse. I don't think mine looks too bad. I don't know, maybe your mileage will vary. I can't speak for the older one, but as for my bike, man, I don't know, it's pretty dang clean to me. Maybe a little sun bleaching here on the top graphics. I mean, let's face it, it's a 4-hour drive one way to each event I ride this year, so that's a lot of time sitting on a trailer in the sun, and then, you know, obviously sitting out all day during the event in the sun. A little bleaching, I guess, would probably be acceptable. Overall, though, I don't know, everything's looking good. Wheel bearings are still feeling tight. Swing arm and linkage bearings are still feeling tight. Had no need to tighten up the steering stem bearing. That's still feeling really good. I don't know, guys. I'm happy. That about concludes everything I think I got to say about this bike. Overall, I freaking love it. It's been the best bike I've owned. I'm not saying any of the other bikes are bad or inferior or just not good. The truth is, we got some great options to choose from in the trials world today. All the major manufacturers are making great bikes, And I think we're really lucky to have bikes in all sorts of different price ranges and availabilities, bikes with different personalities that fit our own individual personalities. That said, for me, this is the bike for me. This is the bike that makes me want to just go out and ride every night and push my limits and try new things. It's the bike that constantly leaves me with a smile on my face. And so for me, man, I'm sold on Vertigo, at least the R2. I can't speak for the R3. I haven't had a chance to ride one yet. I can't speak for the Nitro, but hey, it looks really promising. I can't speak for any of the older bikes, but the R2 300, I freaking love. I did get a chance to play around real quick on a Works 21 250. Seemed like a nice bike, felt like a Vertigo. There are some changes, some differences between the standard and the R series. One of the big things is the R series have a spacer down on the flywheel, helps the bike rev a little faster. It's beyond my technical comprehension, but basically it creates less magnetic drag on the flywheel, lets it spin up faster. They then put a flywheel weight on this bike to give it a little bit more oomph. I personally like it. The standard edition does not have the flywheel weight or the spacer. That said, the bike didn't feel bad, but it didn't have quite the same oomph if you rev the bike up, let off the throttle, and then pop the clutch. Otherwise, the Works series, the Works 21 is a great bike. Certainly good enough for, well, way better than I'll ever be. That said, I could afford the R2, so I got the R2, and I love it. Okay, so for bling, I had S3 grips on there. I love the S3 asymmetric grips. I like the extra thickness of them compared to like the Renthals. Got the S3 bar ends on there. Like I said, S3 carbon fiber fork guards, Vertigo carbon fiber swing arm guards. We're gonna pause for the vehicle because it's loud and annoying. Okay, so anyway, yeah, I know it's what I get for filming right in front of a road. Otherwise, add-ons, yeah, so S3 bar ends, S3 grips, S3 fork protectors, Vertigo carbon fiber swing arm guards. I did have a Vertigo carbon fiber pipe guard. That I'm not pleased with. It was not exactly cheap, and after the first light hit on it, one of the bosses that comes off the hose clamp that mounts it snapped right off. I haven't been able to find another one. Yes, I'm a CNC machinist. I could make myself a new mount. I haven't gotten around to it, but unfortunately it does mean I have a fancy piece of carbon fiber just sitting in the shop doing nothing and not protecting this pipe with the very cool R2 engraving on it. All right, so complaint there, rant over. Anyway, as far as anything else on it, I do have this very cool number plate, if you can see it. It's got a little spring-loaded clamp in there so I can put my scorecard, my punch card right inside of there, holds it great. No more little name tag clips or whatever. I don't know what everybody else does, but that's pretty cool. That's aftermarket. One of the guys in my club makes those custom. Very sweet. It's R&D. It's R&D Metal Fab Ink. I don't know if he still has any more of them, but that's pretty freaking awesome. Otherwise, my bike is bone stock. I haven't done anything else to it. Everything is as it came from the importer and from the dealer. So this is it. This is my R2. This is my Vertigo. This is the bike that I love and I want to ride every day that I can. I'll be riding this well into the winter, and because I live here in Indiana, northern Indiana, where it does go from, I mean, heck, so literally last weekend, the last trials competition I did was 94 degrees Fahrenheit. A day later, it was literally 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And you know what? This bike just runs, and it runs good, and it runs consistent, and you really can't tell much difference between the temperatures. Maybe you can't feel it on your carb bikes. I'm really sensitive to it. Maybe you pick up on it, maybe you don't, but I'm telling you, my carbureted bikes, you know, when it gets a little cooler out, they start surging, not running as good. When it gets really hot out, you know, okay, they start loading up a little easier and they start getting a little bit slower responding. This thing, for the most part, 90% of the time, it runs very consistent. It's always the same, you know, and it just reacts the same all the time. And for me, I need all the help I get because I'm not that good of a rider. So having a bike that's consistent is a big deal for me, and especially with the temperature swings we get here in Indiana. So it's another great thing I love about the fuel injection on the Vertigo. Yes, eventually the fuel pump will fail me. I hear it's a fuel pump out of a KTM, so it should be easy to source. Of course, I got great support from the importer, so I'm not really worried about parts or anything. Lewisport has been great to me. That's Lewisport USA. Freaking awesome service. Yeah, can't talk highly enough about them. Adrian and Mandy have been really good to me personally, and really appreciate their help. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that concludes my review of my 2020 Vertigo R2. If you have any questions, if it's something I didn't cover, feel free to ask. And if I know it, I'll tell you. And if I don't, I'll tell you I don't know, but I'll try to find you an answer anyway. Yeah, that's about all there is to it. This bike's freaking awesome. I 100% love it. If you do like betas, if you're a beta rider, this does have kind of the more upright stance of a beta. It's going to feel similar to a beta. In my opinion, it feels like a stretched out, more responsive beta, and I mean that both in the throttle response as well as the responsiveness to foot peg pressure and just rider input to the bike. This bike feels like it flicks around a little bit easier despite being longer than the beta. Not bashing on beta. Betas are really cool, but I'm just saying for comparison's sake, it feels kind of like a stretched out beta, just, dare I say, better, at least to me. Your mileage might vary. Sorry, don't hate me for, I won't even say I'm hating on beta, but just don't hate me, all right? It's just my opinion, my experience. Your mileage might vary. Anyway, all right, I guess that's it. Because I can keep rattling on all night, but yeah. Any questions, feel free to ask, put something in the comments, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And most likely be prepared to read a small novel, because when I reply, normally I reply in detail and my responses are like that long. All right, catch y'all later.